What up, everybody? Welcome back to the Cafecito and Cane show. Camera's a little wonky there. Sorry about that, guys. But anyway, while I get that fixed, can you guys hear me?
Now I can hear you again. You were going in and out there for a second, at least for me.
Oh, man. All right. Well, while I get my camera situation figured out, Rock and Rant, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Like we were just talking off air, man. There's no such thing as an off season anymore. We got a lot to talk about just from these past few days. It's been pretty nuts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So first thing I wanted to get into is your thoughts.
Well, I will pause here while we wait for John. Here he is. John, is Flo doing your technical stuff today or what?
He must have hacked my system here. Let me try a different camera.
We are stalling here as John gets his audio going. All right, everyone.
Hello, can you hear me?
We got you, John. We got you. We at least have your audio.
All right, let me switch my camera. Hold on one second.
By the time you do this, we will have probably had 37 more hot takes on realignment than the schedule. So,
yeah. All right, my camera does not feel like working right now. So yeah. All right. The schedule. So, obviously, there's the thing that jumped out at me right away was the two bye weeks all pretty much right next to each other, and we play like one game almost over the span of a month. And I'm like, okay, that's ACC being the ACC again. Yeah, what were your thoughts when you saw that?
My first thought, it was, it's not just Miami, so it's hard. We can't just say it's Miami, but the only Miami and I think North Carolina have that happening in that span and are over by October 11th, right? I think one other school has it a couple of weeks later. It might be Duke, but I don't remember because it was unimportant to me after that.
Yeah.
My first thought was just, I don't know what the ACC does, right? Like, I don't want to be the person who has to schedule anything, because it's hard and you have all these teams with open dates and dates they can't use. Stadiums, Miami and Pitt in particular, contribute to that because of pro stadiums in the mix. And you have the out of conference things. But I find it hard to believe that teams that are theoretically on paper in the top echelon of the SEC would get 2 bye weeks by October 11th. Like, I can justify the upside of, hey, we do have a bye week before Florida State. And then we have a bye week before Louisville, who is in a lot of preseason, way too early, top 25s is up there with the new quarterback coming in. So there's benefits there. But the back half of the schedule on paper, with all of that run, including 2 last games, is kind of brutal. So I don't really get what they're doing to their brands by doing that with bye weeks.
Yeah. No, and not only that, also the midweek or the weekday game that we always get. This time it's a Friday night game, just like last year against Virginia Tech. Now, I had a blast at the Virginia Tech game, not going to lie. And it being a Friday, 10 times better than it being on a Thursday night.
Yeah, for sure.
But Saturday night is a million times better than Friday night for obvious reasons. So maybe you have a little bit more knowledge of this. That's one of the reasons I want to have you on. Do you know if the whole Thursday night, Friday night game thing, it being like an every year thing, is that an ACC decision? Is that a school decision? Did we want that? Like, because you look at the Blue Bloods, like the bigger programs, if you think about it, they never play on Thursday night. They never play on Friday night, ever. It's really only us.
Well, the ACC has been doing Thursday night games back for decades. And I don't remember whether in the old Big East days, whether there were Thursday night games. Like, I don't remember when that became a thing. I just remember that we played Virginia Tech on a couple of different Thursday nights, and some of those did not work out well for Miami. For me, I'd rather have a Saturday night game at the same time for sure. But depending upon how schedule breaks, there is a benefit in having all the eyeballs on you, essentially, right? Like it is a pretty unblocked spot. So I think it makes sense. The Big Ten hasn't necessarily done that to some of their schools yet, but I think you'll see more of them getting involved in the future. So I think it's just more a reality of, what they consider the prime matchups. Virginia Tech, has been mid, like Miami's been mid for a long time. So it's a good opportunity for them to get on TV. And that's probably why they're just looking ahead of going Blacksburg at night. We don't know how Virginia Tech will be, but the scene will be great. So let's put that game out there. That's kind of what I think is going on there.
Got it. Yeah, because for as long as I can remember, even in the Big East days, we always played one Thursday night game every year.
Yeah. Back then you weren't even going against the NFL, right? So it was like a clear, you're the only eyes in town. And I think the pain of that is, theoretically a short week if they don't schedule you correctly. But there's a lot of upside too. I'm not completely opposed to them, especially when it's on the road, because I know it's hard for a lot of Miami fans to even try to get to Hard Rock on a Thursday night with that traffic and everything for big games. So that's always also to some degree an excuse. But I'm not thrilled about. I think the scene is amazing for us playing Virginia Tech at night in there, but I also don't like us playing at night in Blacksburg either.
Yeah, for sure.
For just a pure there's just another energy level there that takes up what is already a strong energy level.
Of course. But looking at the rest of the schedule, obviously we open with Notre Dame, that being they just announced that to be a Sunday night game, which is interesting. I think the only other time we played on a Sunday that I can remember was that LSU game in 2018 in Dallas, which I don't want to remember, but it happened. And then I think back in '99, we did a kickoff classic at the Meadowlands against Ohio State. And I remember we kicked their ass in that game. But those are the only two Sunday games I can remember us playing.
Yeah, we've had the Monday night Labor Day weekend game, I think, with Florida State at least once, if not more than that. But that's turned into a great slot. The NFL is not there. Again, it's like a prime window. You're only losing a day in terms of whether you have a game the week that follows. I tend to think that they have basically, at least the ESPN contract and ABC has now made the Sunday night game of that opening or official week one, as sort of the marquee game of the weekend. That's the prime time game. Yeah.
No, it's a great slot. That Labor Day weekend it's become my favorite weekend of the year because it's games Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And that Sunday slot's good because, like you said, I like that one because we will have everyone's eyeballs. Everyone's kind of waiting for the NFL to start. It's still another week for them before it starts. So yeah, that time slot I like. How are you feeling about? I know it's very early, but we have made a lot of roster acquisitions. I feel like the roster, outside of maybe bringing in a couple of more impact guys, I think the roster's 90% set, probably, maybe close to that. How are you feeling about that game as of now? I know it's early, February 1st, but based on what you saw from Notre Dame this past season, how are you feeling about that? And while you answer, I'm going to hop off and hop back and see if I get my camera turned back on. But yeah, go ahead and answer.
Yeah, for sure. So my take, in trying to be as not orange and green filtered as possible, is Notre Dame's breaking in a new quarterback going into what is going to be a literally insane environment at Hard Rock on Sunday night, which is basically going to be like a Saturday night in terms of the fans being able to have a full tailgate. And, it's not like Notre Dame's quarterback has had some break-in period like Arch Manning has had in Texas. So that's your first game that you're getting into in hostile environment that you got boat raced the last time you were there 7 years ago. I think the talent on the Miami side is better now. And I think the talent on the Notre Dame side is better now, but I'm not as concerned. I'm concerned about that game because it's a massive game. It's against most likely a top 5 team. But I feel pretty good heading into that game generally about where Miami will be, with, of course, the caveat that the off-season healing process is good for Carson Beck, and that they have enough time to really get all the throws in when he's able to start throwing again. That if those things happen, like the things we expect to happen and plan for happening, Carson Beck coming back, Miami getting, some additions in the portal, but Notre Dame will too. So like maybe they offset, maybe they don't. But I think when it comes down to is you're going to have an experienced quarterback, hopefully healthy, in a massively hostile environment. I was there in the 2017 game. We know what the Hard Rock can be at its peak. It's effectively a Saturday night game because it's a 3-day weekend. And we don't know what Notre Dame has in their quarterback. And that is a tough game for him to really start and see what he can do. So I feel pretty good about it. And you're back on camera, so we got you.
Yep, you can see me now. I agree. I feel, I don't know, I've gone back and forth on that one. I feel pretty good actually going into that game, but even though I know it's going to be a tougher game, it being week one, it could be unpredictable. You don't always get an prediction of either team week one. That's why like anything can happen. It has that kind of feel to it. I have a feeling it's going to be very low scoring. Again, they're bringing in a new quarterback.
And a new DC. We're doing a new DC.
We're doing a new DC. We're breaking in Carson Beck, who my belief is he's going to be ready by the time, the lights are on. But like you said, when's he going to be able to start throwing again because of his elbow? Probably like in the summer, maybe late spring. That could have an effect on things.
Right.
So a lot of different things can happen. But I think if we come in healthy at our best, I have no issues saying, I think Miami can win this game without too much of an issue.
I think Notre Dame's going to be overrated. Miami will be probably somewhere between 8 and 15, right? We'll see what happens with the spring portal, if anything massive shakes out or how spring practice goes. So this is all on paper. Like there's no receipts here because we don't know yet. But just talking about it, so we have this stuff to talk about. All of the way too earlys, essentially, with like maybe one exception, ESPN, shocker, have Miami somewhere between. I mean, there's some that have us like Dennis Dodd, I think, has Miami like 3 or 4 overall, but most of them tend to have us in like that 8 to 15, 9 to 15 range. I think ESPN's like 23, which I also think is too low.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've seen one where Notre Dame is not top 10, and most of them have them as like top 5, top 6 heading into the season on paper. Yeah.
I'm looking at a lot of times when I pull up the schedule, I go to fbschedules.com because they have they'll show the non-conference games like 3-4 years ahead sometimes.
Right.
But right now, I guess this is like an early prediction. They have, or no, maybe this is where they finished in 2024. They have them. They're number 4, Florida Gators 18, Louisville number 20, SMU 15. So that's probably their season-ending rankings for 2024, which is probably around where all those teams are going to be.
Yeah, for the most part, in those things, Clemson's universally on, which we won't play unless we make it to the ACC championship game. Notre Dame's universally on. SMU is universally on. Florida is as well, including some amazingly inflated rankings, in my opinion. And then Louisville tends to maybe be on or not. Like it depends upon who it is. That's like the one that on paper we could have up to 4 preseason top 25 games on. I'm also old enough to remember when FSU was preseason top 10.
Yeah, so am I. I remember those days. I remember times where, wide right 3 in 91. I mean, I was a little kid, but I've gone back and seen it. Like, I remember at the start of the game, the announcers were they were talking about how Miami, Florida State, and Florida were number 1, 2, and 3 heading into that weekend.
Right.
Yeah. I remember days well. But no, back to Notre Dame really quick though. I could see us winning that game for sure. Here's the thing though. Big picture, if I zoom out, Notre Dame and Florida. Realistically, I'm okay, probably we split those two. You know what I mean? Going into it realistically. But then I'm I don't know. Both those games are winnable, but I'm afraid to say it. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't even know where I'm settling. I'm kind of in the zone of 11-1 is the new 12-0, right? As a thing for college football because of parity. So 10-2 is the new 11-1 by proxy. So that has me on paper going. I think Miami's 9-3 based off of that because it's like 10-2, and I'm expecting there to be two weird losses somewhere in the season, and not necessarily Notre Dame and Florida State. But then I go, I don't know where the third one comes up. I'm not there yet to think that we are what would have been a 10-2. Like I still think we're missing something, but I actually can't really guarantee I know what the three losses would be in that kind of zone. I feel like one or two of them's coming at the back end of the season again, and maybe two of them, and maybe the only two are towards the end. Because until we prove that we can actually do that and not blow it, I'm just going to remain a little bit skeptical and like protecting my heart along the way for disappointment after this past year. But I don't believe the Florida hype to the degree that others do. I think Notre Dame is a fair conversation, especially in the new year, but the new quarterback throws it off. I think DJ Lagway is very talented. But I also think that big win over Ole Miss was as much Ole Miss at the end of the season, delivering a Miami versus Syracuse or Georgia Tech kind of game that like Florida rose and Ole Miss played down, and therefore you had that, and everyone's building off like with the hype for Florida based off of that specific game at the end of the season, as that DJ Lagway is the new Tim Tebow, right? And I think DJ Lagway is massively talented, but I don't think that Florida is massively talented, and I don't think that that they're worthy of a preseason top 10 or top 7 rank where some people have them.
Yeah, I think Florida is a solid team
for sure.
I think they play together, and I think their defense ended up finishing out very solid. Like they had one of the they had one of the best defenses in the country this past season. But so I don't think it's the team. I think the hype around DJ Lagway is, like you said, it's a bit overblown. Very talented, 5-star recruit, all that stuff. I agree, very talented. But
like I take him for sure. Like I'm not dunking on him or anything like that.
Yeah, I take him. I'm just saying he has flaws. He throws interceptable passes quite a bit. So, another game, I could see it going either way. I think the great equalizer, though, especially in these early games, is the running game that I think Miami is going to have. That is going to be nearly impossible to stop. We're going to lean on it more, and I think we're going to be more committed to it. Because, this past season you had Cam, arguably the best player in the game. How do you not put the ball in his hands? You know what I mean? Like, I get it.
Right, for sure. And probably the ball went into Cam's hands more than they even planned on because Cam had the ability to check at will, which I'm sure Carson Beck will probably have something similar if he builds that trust up too. But so they probably even over-index towards like giving it in his hands because Cam just saw the moments it took him.
Yeah. No, and there were times he even put us in a hole early in a game and he had to dig us out. So, I don't think there's going to be so much of that. I think it's going to be more of like the ball control, moving the chains, and really what 2023 should have been if TVD didn't throw so many interceptions. What it would have been if like took his checkdowns, didn't throw the ball in harm's way. We settled for more field goals. We're not in that season. So moving ahead, got the Gators. You got the first bye week on the 27th. Then you got Florida State on the 4th. I am a fan of playing them earlier in the season because there were times where we played them like way back in the day, second to last game of the season, and then they would have to play Florida after that. Then early 2000s, the Butch Davis, Larry Coker days, we always played them in October, that first Saturday night.
For sure.
When it was nice and hot in the Orange Bowl, it was great atmosphere. I'm a fan of playing them earlier in the season. Not too concerned about that one, so I won't spend too much time on it.
I mean, look, they shouldn't be the worst team in the ACC, but, they are both – they should be suspect until Mike Norvell proves that he's not again, right? 3 of the last 5 years, they had a losing record. I know there's weird circumstances there, and most way too early ACC rankings have them anywhere from 8 to 11. Like that's what they are on paper again.
Right. So we'll see. I see them as a potential bowl team, maybe, but probably realistically like a 5-7 team. But they got new renovations at Doak Campbell.
Awesome. Everybody, your shoes might not get wet when you hit the halftime bathroom when you do the road trip.
There you go. And I was already, not that I'm going to go, but I already heard because people were looking at and taking screenshots of like the ticket prices. They're already pretty high for that
Yeah,
game.
because they reduced capacity. They did their version of, their own version of a Hard Rock reorg. There's not as many seats in there anymore.
Got it. Yep. Hide the empty seats. I see what they're doing. Yep. By October 11th. Then you got that Friday night game. That game makes me very nervous because it's Jeff Brom coming in on a Friday night. Yeah, that one makes me very nervous, but let's see who they have at quarterback and all that.
Well, I mean, I assume it's going to be Miller Moss, right? Transfer over from USC, and I catch a lot of their games out here on the West Coast, and like accidentally hear more conversation. Like USC last year, before they made the change at quarterback, they were essentially either the best worst team in the country or the worst best team, right? Because they have 4 games that came down to the last drive, where any sequence of events could have flipped their record pretty dramatically, more towards the positive. So Lincoln Riley was definitely on the hot seat. There caused some trauma there. A big exodus around Miller Moss as well. They also got a lot of people in the portal. I actually think the Miller Moss under Jeff Brom's hands is scary. I think he has the ability to put him in the right spot that you would have thought that Lincoln Riley would have been able to do. So that is definitely a game that I'm both looking forward to and apprehensive about.
Oh, I'm very apprehensive about that one because you look at the schedule, and Flo brought this point up to me the other day, and he's right. We play a lot of really good quarterbacks this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing that makes me a little nervous. And that's the first one. No, the first good quarterback I would say would be Lagway. Then you face, likely Miller Moss. And then Stanford, not too concerned about that. Should be a victory.
Yep.
Otherwise, we have serious problems if that's not a victory. Then we head into November in Dallas against SMU. So we finally get the Rhett Lashley versus Miami matchup.
Right.
Then that's the third really good quarterback we face this year because Jennings, that kid's the real deal to me. He started as a 3-star recruit, fits that system perfectly. Came in, he was called upon when Preston Stone wasn't playing too well, and he took off pretty much. That one makes me a little nervous as well, but I feel like that one, if we just establish the run early and we're physical with them up front, we shouldn't have too much of a problem. That might just be a matter of playing keep away from their offense.
Yeah, I mean, SMU has they have their previous 2 or 3 games. They have 2 cupcakes sandwiched around, so they go Stanford to Clemson, and I think Clemson's on the road, and then Wake Forest on the road, and they come back from Miami. I don't know where TBD is on his healing cycle, whether he's essentially a red shirt for next year or not. I'm not sure where his injury is. I just have these weird, messed up, trauma of 20 years of zone of somehow he goes out and TBD gets his golf swing back and somehow does something against Miami, because that would just be the old school last 20 years Miami quintessential story. So I'm praying for that not to be the case, but it's going to be a tough game, and that'll be their biggest home game of the year, based off of their schedule. So they'll be up for that one
for sure. Then you got Syracuse. Years past, that'd be kind of looked at as the same as Stanford. That should be a victory. Not anymore. Syracuse is for real. Fran Brown, I think he's going to do very well there.
But do you feel the same? I mean, I'm not completely up to speed on what they have done or what's on deck for them quarterback wise. It's clearly they're going into a downgrade zone too, like Miami is, but I think they're taking a bigger hit on paper than Miami is going to Carson back.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up really quick, or if somebody can drop it in the chat, see what their quarterback situation is. Because going from Kyle McCord, who's probably going to be a 3rd or 4th round-ish quarterback, who was I was very impressed with Kyle McCord, actually, because
other than one game.
Huh?
Other than one game, he was pretty great the whole season. He had that 5 or 6 interception game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right, against Pitt randomly, who we also play. We'll get to. Yeah, let's see. This is who they have. Oh no, it's still showing from last year because McCord is still there. But yeah, they'll have a downgrade as well. I just think they're a very well coached team. They have size. They're going to have athletes on the outside. I know Fran Brown. That's going to be his focus. So yeah, James Kane, thank you for bringing that up. Syracuse had the best contested catch rate for wide receivers. That was on full display against us. I can tell you that. But yeah, that one's not going to be easy just because I think they're going to come in very prepared. And that is an area I know we lack.
Right.
In game coaching, X's and O's. It has been an area of weakness for us. Talent acquisition? No. Spending money, bringing in great talent, no. Bringing in size. We're good at all that stuff. It's just once the whistle blows and the ball's kicked off, that's what we have.
We definitely need to get out of this cycle of losing to teams that do more with less while we do less with more.
Correct. I think even last year going 10-3, 10-win season, happy that we got the 10, but at the same time, we underachieved again. So hopefully that starts to stop. Syracuse, so we have them at home. And then we got our last home game. Now, we do have 8 of 12 home games, so it being a tougher schedule I hope is going to be a little bit offset by the fact that we have 8 home games. I think that's huge, and some pretty too. NC State at home, Syracuse at home, Louisville at home. Those I think are going to be well attended, especially if we haven't bottomed out and we're still winning. But we got NC State at home on the 15th. Should be a good one. Should be a victory. We'll see. And then
NC State was really hyped up last year. They are not heading into the way too early zone from others. They're in the bottom 25 or bottom third of the projections from the ACC side. Like, they haven't reloaded to make up for what they lost and didn't deliver on last year. But we've had some interesting games with NC State, and they're not. If there was a team that maybe people have low expectations for that bounces back to the mean, maybe that's like the team that does that, because at least have a decent coach, even if he's had some pretty middling years recently.
Yeah. No, they have an excellent coach, in my opinion. So, again, won't be easy. Burstone says Syracuse took Richie Collins Jr. from LSU. Don't know much about him. Yeah, I don't know a lot about him either at the moment. And then you go into your final 2 home games. I think the season can possibly come down to these 2 games, because while Notre Dame game, the Florida game, all important, but they're more important for optics and recruiting, if you ask me. Ultimately, I want that ACC crown. You can lose both those games like at the beginning of the season, but if you get hot late and go on a run and make it to Charlotte and win, similar to what Clemson did this past season, hey, give me that instead. I'm at the point where I don't need the bells and whistles. I don't need the big high-profile victory, because we got that last year with the Florida game. By the end of the season, it didn't matter that much. Give me the ACC. How are your feelings about those last 2 road games at the end of November in places where it's very cold and 2 well-coached teams?
Look, I hate those games back-to-back on the road. Somebody needs to start paying somebody in the ACC offices or remind them that we did not sue them, even if we hate them just as much. The Pittsburgh game is the one like, I wish the ACC would stop trying to make the Miami Pitt thing a rivalry. It's just not. It never has felt like a rivalry along the way. I know we're kind of screwed because most of our theoretical rivals have a real like in-state rivalry game that's always that last week, so it's always hard. But that's just not the. I'd almost like to figure out anything else. Like, I'd rather try to do that with SMU because of just the coaching than Pitt. But that aside, they're bringing back a quarterback that had a really great year. They started off strong last year, but kind of faltered at the end. I think they could be coming back in a pretty good position. They're not necessarily projected to be in the top 4 of the ACC, but if there's a game on our schedule that reeks of Miami blowing it, it's that game, right? I do think we need to win one of the first 2 games, because I think you have to look at every scenario, like if you just think to where we all were in weeks 10, 11, 12, 13, the whole, ESPN propaganda campaign with SEC, you want to know that you have a shot for a second one. And when the ACC does what it did do in the playoffs and the bowl season, even though 1 year to the next is not the same, having our strength of schedule look really good, including some really quality wins from teams that stayed in the top 25, is pretty important. I hate to do you want to root for ACC teams and other things, but like you kind of do need that to happen for them to be strong outside of like losing to you, because it does help. I don't know that it would have changed things this year because we had that control, but those last two games are not the ACC doing us any favors. But Miami has more talent than both of those teams, right? We do. The question is, like, are we going to deliver on that talent and not hurt ourselves with coaching decisions or stupid penalties? Disciplined team finally becoming a program that preaches discipline and having your stuff together, actually acting that way on the field with not having the worst untimely penalties ever on a consistent basis. But those two games, I can completely see a scenario where we're 10-0 and we blow those two games. Like I would not be shocked on paper to see that, right? It just could be this year's Georgia Tech and Syracuse.
Yeah. That whole stretch really after the second bye week is like, that's the season right there. I do see what you're saying, though, as far as the optics goes for those first two games. I'm not saying we're going to lose them. I'm just saying for the ACC title at the end of the day, that's what people are going to remember. But what I think is going to happen in those first two games, I think we at least split them, worst case.
Yeah.
I don't see a scenario where we lose both. And honestly, we're at home. Again, we can control the clock as much as we want. So, yeah, that's kind of how I see, the early prediction. That's kind of how I see this playing out. Maybe we split those two. We probably trip up one really weird loss middle of the season. And those last two games, I see us splitting them. I know that's kind of a conservative guess, but
yeah, we're in the same spot. I think there's maybe some weird third one that I don't know. Carson Beck goes down and we're in quarterback hell for a second, or maybe not. But 9-3 is what I think, because I just think that's the new 10-2. But I don't know what that third game would be. So I think 9-3, 10-2 is where I feel like we are right now. But could be pleasantly surprised. We could get a major wide receiver in the portal in the spring. One of our own in-house guys, JoJo, could really blow up in game one, and we realize we have a true number one all season as opposed to somebody developing into that space. Our serial killer looking DC actually is a serial killer DC, right? And even if our offense drops from 1 to 25th, our defense goes from ass to 20, and then we're a pretty balanced team. So it's definitely going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, if our defense is, I don't want to say mediocre. It needs to be better than mediocre. Our defense, if it's above average, top 30, top 40.
Yeah.
And our offense can move the ball effectively, I think we're fine. As far by fine, I mean win 9 games. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, if he comes in and he pushes the right buttons, kind of like Manny Diaz's first year as a DC, and all of a sudden our defense goes from, like you say, ass to top 20, top 15, it could be even better than that. But actually, I was on the site taking a quick peek at 2026. I forgot we play South Carolina in 2026 at South Carolina. That should be a fun one.
Yeah, this could be a great one. And then we play away at Notre Dame that year too, if I'm not mistaken.
Let me scroll through. Yep, I see it away at Notre Dame. They don't have the time set yet. I don't know how official these are, but yeah, it says 2026, September 5th. I'm guessing that's the opener at South Carolina. All right.
At least, you know what? At least Miami, we might get our A&M games here and there and our Bethunes, but we don't shy away from scheduling out a conference. And I know Notre Dame is technically the ACC deal, but we had Notre Dame, on our home and away, trying to do as many times as we could with them before that became more of a thing. And obviously, we're about to, based off of the news this week, play them even more regularly. And I bet that more regularly means every year, despite whatever they said in the news about 2 of those 3 teams every year. It's going to be every year, I would get, like 5 out of 6 versus 2 out of 3.
Yeah, no. I'm very much looking forward to that, and we'll get into that now. But yeah, no, we can thank for the Gators home and home, the Notre Dome home and home. If I'm not mistaken, we can thank Mark Richt for that, I believe, because during his tenure, I think that's when those were getting scheduled out. And during the Al Golden, Randy Shannon days, a lot of our non-conference games were like the Toledos of the world.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to give too much credit nor too much thing. I know most of the options were like that for sure, in terms of scheduling the Toledos. But Miami always has been trying to schedule Florida and Notre Dame as regularly as possible. Those two schools specifically canceled series, right, and made it harder to get them back on. Notre Dame didn't want to do it forever, right, and then they finally did it. And Florida, has been essentially like every back home and home series now since they canceled the series after whatever the mid 80s, after 87, 88, whatever that was, every decade or so we do a home series. So that's more on them. So I can't even like give crap to our terrible ADs or timid coaches at the time on those games, because I know they do try to schedule them. But when those things didn't happen, we have done too many of those Toledo things back in the Randy Shannon days, like you're alluding to.
Yeah, I remember they would argue, "Oh, it's for recruiting. We want to recruit those areas." Man, get out of here.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah, we have a wealth of Ohio players on our team. I can name almost none of them right now offhand. I mean, know we've had them. I'm not saying we haven't, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's not like that Toledo game got us. Thank God we did that, because somebody saw us on TV that had never known the state of Florida and Miami existed.
Yeah, no. Poor Knox asking, don't we have a game against Auburn scheduled too? Yes. 2029, I'm seeing here. They even have the date and everything here. Wow. September 1st, 2029 at Hard Rock Stadium. Looking forward to that one. For 2029, like you see it on paper, it seems so far away. It's only 4 years away.
Crazy.
Which is insane. Yeah. So the new ACC deal. We don't have to pick it apart too much. I know you guys did a great job of it on College Football Express on Thursday. If you guys haven't checked it out, please do. It's on the Miami Flow channel, correct? You guys do it? Yeah. So go check it out. You guys had the Utah guy on. He put some great analytics. The biggest thing I got out of that was when Miami wins, yeah, it gets eyeballs, because he was showing that we have the best TV ratings, like hands down. Like honestly, the team in second place, it wasn't even that close. Miami was number one in viewership in the ACC this past season.
Correct.
Teams that during years that they were mediocre, like 2015 to like a couple years ago, I think you guys showed that we were still like top three.
We were top three. Like Miami's floor. So after 15 to 20 years of essentially 7 and 5, Miami's floor was established, and it's always like 1.25 to 1.5 million. Varies based off of like teams that we get, right? That or placement, because networks matter. But that was essentially the floor. And when in the last year or two, when conference realignment conversations were happening, Florida State fans were doing these big victories because their TV ratings and they were number one. I was like, well, you're right. Like those are the numbers. Let's see what happens when you have a bad year. So they had a bad year. And amazing, their floor is basically 1.25 million too, right? So for all of their talk, that's what happened. 2 and 10 floor, maybe, so it's a little bit worse. But like ours is 20 years of that, 7 and 5. They came down because they got moved off of networks to less prime things. Their fans tuned out. Their floor is still in the ACC is massively better than the 4th place team. So it's a clear Miami, Clemson, Florida State world in the ACC, depending upon your schedule. Victories matter, what networks you're on or matter. The ACC has lost a lot of slots on ABC because of the SEC deal. So the ACC has been featured on ABC less, which matters more again than it did several years ago because of cord cutting, right? So less people have ESPN, but almost everybody can get ABC still for free in one form or another. And obviously people who know everything can find any of those channels for free if you want to online. But it matters for like the baseline on TV ratings is more. But yeah, the 3 of them there, and Miami instantly jumped up the minute we had games that people wanted to watch again.
Yeah, and hopefully that continues. But yeah, just your general thoughts on this new deal, because I think some people were excited about, oh, we're gonna get a bigger cut of something because our viewership is high. But I know, looking into it a little more and listening to you guys, yeah, it's not really nothing that really makes a dent. The mission is still to lead the ACC.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the gap between the Power Two and the other conferences is going to continue to grow, as far as money, and
Right.
that's, we got to get out of that situation. So, just your general thoughts on the deal, if it means anything for Miami at all, and what do you think happens in the next few years?
I mean, to me, there's still a couple of things that we have been reported to or alluded to that we don't know yet, right? That could impact it. I haven't read anything that says that, ESPN just basically took an option they already had. And there was no part of any reporting that said they took an option and they said, ACC, we really like you guys. We're going to add more money to help you settle your internal stuff. So here's some more money. Now you do your reallotment. So until we hear that they did that, we can assume that the numbers that have been reported about how the annual deal escalates, which is like 3 to 5% a year, on this new option through 2036, is in fact just that. So that means that you're at, as you approach 2029, depending upon numbers, and there's like, take it all with a grain of salt, but there's anywhere between a $30 and $50 million difference between what an ACC team like Miami, Florida State, or Clemson would get from the media side of the deal to what an SEC or Big Ten team would get from the exact same portion of their deal. So if you sit there and go, okay, there's two pools now of extra money that Miami could theoretically get. One was they already put this into place, which is when Cal, Stanford, and SMU came in, ESPN was required to give more money at the base rate for those schools. SMU's taking none of that. The other schools only taking 30% of that through, I think, 2031. That money is a success initiative. And depending upon how you perform on the field in bowls, that money can be allocated to those teams and whatever formula they're doing. I've heard the top number, if you went through all the way through the playoffs to like the national championship, might be another like 20 million, but it's not 20 or 25. So you haven't made up that gap, but you're making up some of it. This new one is basically saying, okay, all you ACC schools, you're getting $50 million in whatever 2025 from the media deal, but instead we're going to take some percentage of that. I don't know that it wasn't reported. Let's say they take 20%. So you're all going from 50 to 40 million. Now we have like 100, theoretically 170 million available. And depending on some TV matrix model for the brand deal, depending upon how you perform on TV, but it's not just a pure ratings thing, because a game could get moved to a platform because they want to get you more subscriptions, right? And in the term of that deal, so you don't actually get the ratings you would have, but that's not because the game wouldn't have drawn it. Like NBC's done that with Peacock, where a Big Ten game was moved to Peacock to get people to download the app. But some form of that could split that money up, but we don't know like how much that's ratio, at the top or down. So either way, I think it's going to be interesting to see whether any team who does great on TV during the season and whatever else they're formulating, plus does well on the field, can close that gap to within a few $1 million, which was what one of the reports, ironically, I think that was from the ESPN reporter who couldn't get a comment from ESPN. Really weird. Whether that closes it up and whether you can predict it, right, from year to year. So ultimately, it's good, right? It's like Kiss, you got something out of it, and it could be a lot. It could be really great in a year, and it can help stem the bleeding for a while to offset, the program having to absorb that cost if you want to compete with everybody else. But I think it's kind of like playing ball control, is what I said the other night. Like you sort of punted, you're waiting for the right opportunity to do that. Ultimately, you're hoping that Florida State and Clemson's, the other parts of the report, that their settlement with the ACC does in fact not reduce necessarily the grant of rights from 2036 to 2031, which would coincide with most of the other conferences' media deals coming up, but at least brings them down. Like maybe the penalties for exiting are less, plus there's less years in the deal that you have to buy out. And, you hope that 2028, 2029, you start hearing conversations again about expansion or realignment. My biggest take about all of this is like that's so far away in a world where we're living through the house settlement and revenue share and everything else like that. Like we can talk about that because on paper that's the conversation to have, but think about the conversations we were having 3 years ago. The things that have come to fruition since then, like it's very hard to sit there and think that those things that something else won't completely happen, that private equity is not going to come in and completely change the thought process, that 2 years of revenue sharing isn't going to bankrupt 20 schools in the bottom part of the P4 in their athletic department and they can't keep up. Like who the hell knows ultimately? But that's to me the biggest takeaway is realignment's punted for a minute. It's probably an upside for Miami, Clemson, Florida State, or any other school, Georgia Tech, who does well on the field and does well on the other matrix in a way that's better and penalizes the people who aren't really trying. But it's going to be a minute before we really figure out what's going on.
Yeah. It's just going to be interesting to see over these next 5 to 8 years the gap that's also going to happen between the haves and the have-nots, the top 40, 50 programs in the country, and the rest is a lot of teams. That's like, we're talking like 70, 80 teams.
Right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even take into account the fact that like once the next round of the college football playoff goes, like ACC teams are at Big Ten and SEC teams are getting like north of $20 million for the playoff kitty, and we're getting like 12 or 13 every single year, right? Or whatever else is going to happen in 26, 27 with how many automatic bids. Like there's so much wild card. So top line, like in theory, it's positive, but it's like positive and like you got a Prius, but you didn't get a Ferrari.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, positive. You got a car at least.
Yeah.
The net positive, I guess. But yeah, ultimately, good point, Ian. Georgia Tech being in the media deal is huge for, they're in that Atlanta market. And if
they're spending finally.
They are spending a little more NIL money. I have noticed that. So, we'll see what happens there. But anyway, man, I don't want to have you on too long. I know it's early where you're at, so
Oh, it's midday. I guess got the Senior Bowl, which we actually have players in that have draft prospects for a change, so that'll give us something later in the day.
Yes, no, the Senior Bowl. I know the East-West Shrine game happened earlier this week. I know Kiko and Jacoby and some of those guys were in that game, but the Senior Bowl being the bigger one, you got Jalen Rivers, X, and Arroyo, main guys in that one. All showing out, all doing great in practice this week. And that's big because you're going up against the best of the best. That's why people pay attention to these practices. So hopefully they put on a show today. I see no reason why they shouldn't, and raise their draft stock, because X and Arroyo particularly, they can sneak into the second round or higher.
Yeah, I think that X was definitely getting they were both getting a lot of credit. Now, granted, like my feed is going to be seeing highlights get shared is going to like tend to go towards CANES, but they were coming from just random NFL sources, right? I didn't see every other great play that some other players there did.
Yeah.
But X, once all of these guys, once it comes down to combine day, right, it will be what's all said and done, as ridiculous as some of that stuff will be. I don't know what he's testing at speed wise, but I can see him being, on the field. I think he's going to deliver possibly first round results when it's all said and done. That's what I believe about Xavier, even if he gets drafted 5th round, 4th round, 3rd round. Like I think that's practically what he's going to be, but they don't need to draft him that high most likely, but who knows what happens. Arroyo's the one, like I'm, hoping everything's awesome today for him. I hope he delivers wow results at the combine, because he has a chance of potentially sneaking into the bottom half of the first round, if not just being at the top half of the second round. And it would be great for the narrative, for recruiting, for Miami to have two things of Cam Ward moves from a 5th rounder to the number 1 player taken in the first round, and somebody who Miami developed but had injuries but was finally able to get healthy, went from off the radar for many to 2nd round or 1st round draft pick. And that's what can happen there. And, oh, by the way, did you see over here that Carson Beck is doing 5 major NIL deals that are going to bring him $10 million, even if he turns into the next Ryan Leaf?
Yes. True. No, all positive for sure. But Rock, thank you for being on, man. Thank you for
Thanks for the invite, man. I appreciate it. It's always good to chop it up.
Yeah, always good to chop it up, man. But no, if you want to plug any of your stuff before we log off, please go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm on with Flo on Thursday nights with Javi the General, and we're covering mostly national college football with a little bit of Miami filters through it. But that's what intending to do the show, and it's kind of wild. Every once in a while, we have some good guests on, and then I do a show on Sunday nights on the College Football Mafia Network, where we're really just like a radio show, just taking everybody's comments and just like reacting, because like we're all insane about college football and just want to talk about it all the time. So it's just a cool little chill hang. So always great to have the Cane fans wherever they are, as just another random idiot just loves football and the Canes in particular.
Yes, same. All right.
Thanks, John.
Enjoy your Saturday. Go Canes.